Is modern Sonic worth saving? Welcome to the very first episode of Nitpicks and Pixels. So you know Sonic, right? Blue spiny guy, loves chili dogs, has one terrifying merged eyeball that you can never unsee! Sorry about that. But if you were to describe Sonic in one word, it would probably have something to do with speed. After all, that's what his games have been about. Right? Well, maybe not quite. Let's look at the original Sonic the Hedgehog for a second. Though there's speed in the game to be sure, there are small things that stop your forward momentum over time. Whether it's blocks obstructing your path, enemies in the line of fire, or springs that push you back earlier in the level. Everything is designed for the player to be actively aware of their environment. I'll give you an example. In the second stage, you're presented with a basic block puzzle. Put the block on the button, the spikes raise, and Sonic can move forward. But a player speeding through the level doesn't think about pushing block backwards, so they push it off of the spikes to a conveniently placed block width platform. And trapped. Now, while this might have been a little bit of an evil trick by the designers, it reinforces the same basic idea. Analyze the environment you're running into. It's actually very clever in a way. It puts you in the mindset of someone who is running at that speed and worried about the obstacles and hazards they might not see coming. So great, Sonic is more about the careful use of speed to solve puzzle and platforming challenges. But then how did he become the mascot for speed in video games? Well, partly it was because he was one of the first of his kind, and partly it had to do with Sega's marketing. After all, Sonic was the poster child for the Sega Genesis, so Sega put all of their marketing into outpowering the competition. This drastically changed the way that Sonic worked, from in-game changes like the spin dash in Sonic 2, to marketing strategies like
blast processing, which makes him faster than ever.
Now, as much as I like the older Sonic games just fine, I think that there is a sense of cognitive dissonance here between the marketing and the actual gameplay. For those that don't know, cognitive dissonance is when your mind holds multiple things to be true that contradict each other. In this case, Sonic is both about absolute speed and the maintenance and control of that speed. That's kind of like having tea and no tea at the same time. You can see the impact of this dissonance throughout the Sonic franchise, especially when it speeds into 3D. Yeah, see what I did there with the speed, because cognitive dissonance of speed and...
You're bad and you should feel bad.
Thank you. Anyway, the Sonic Adventure games and Sonic Heroes mitigated this problem somewhat by having multiple playable characters, each with their own unique playstyle. Even if some of the characters were less popular than others. Big the cat. The more recent games have either become totally different than the original series, over-the-top speed fests where you need to hold down a stick for a certain amount of time, or... Anyways, not to mention, Sonic Team has seemed to spend less time focusing on adjusting their core gameplay and more focusing on more complex storylines. And that's the sad truth of it. 3D Sonic games haven't really evolved since the original Sonic Adventure. I mean, I know that they have to change things from a 2D to a 3D space, but it feels like they took out a lot of the challenge and fun and didn't give us a lot to work with. They turned speed into a chore rather than fun. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that speed is easy to translate from 2D to 3D in games. It's not. It's one of the most difficult things to do, especially because they're two wholly different beasts. But let's compare the modern Sonics to Saints Row 4. Now, stay with me on this. In the game, you have superpowers, and one of those superpowers happens to be super speed. Now, in this game, speed isn't only fun, but creates an immense feeling of power and competence within the world. Speed doesn't just feel like a gimmick to get away from other games, it actually feels useful and freeing. And that's what I think speed does best in the 3D space, that feeling of unrestricted freedom. So the question is, what do we do with modern Sonic? Should we send him off to that big chili dog in the sky? Is there any use left for him?
It's no use!
Well, I wouldn't put him down for the count just yet. I think Sonic needs to adapt for the modern age and get away from his branding somewhat. Try something different and new for his franchise. How about a game where you can completely control Sonic's speed on the fly? The faster you move, the more points you get, and the better score you get overall, but the more enemies spawn. This creates an interesting dynamic between gameplay and difficulty. Or if you want to really go crazy, there's... Oh god, this is going to be tough to sell. What if we could have an open world game? Nothing like GTA with those giant maps, but maybe 2 or 3 central hubs where free roaming is encouraged and you can have emergent gameplay between enemies and the main character. I mean, as a personal pipe dream, I would love it to take place in the Sonic the Hedgehog Saturday morning cartoon universe. I mean, just imagine running through the forests of Mobius, or going through Robotnik's cybernetic factories. Even the missions could be varied with this. Imagine a game where you could actually go from guard to guard using Sonic's speed and take them out one by one, so that way none are alerted and you can get all of your friends through at the same time. Yes, I admit, I just asked for a stealth mission in a Sonic game, but using the right mechanics, it could totally work. Regardless of what level of variation the Sonic series needs, there's one thing that we see that it desperately needs from all of this. Freedom. Insert your America jokes here. Speed in a 3D space is all about the minimalization of constraint, about feeling more powerful and useful than you would without it. I mean, what's the point of speed if you can barely use it? If these games want to survive in a modern context, they need to focus as much on the freedom given to the player as showing how fast Sonic can move. Without that kind of freedom, speed feels artificial and gamey in the 3D environment, which is what a lot of fans have been crying out against in modern Sonic games. So, is modern Sonic worth saving? It's going to take a hell of a lot of doing, but I think it's worth it. Sonic both needs and deserves more than just another hold the stick in the right direction until you win kind of game. Sonic deserves a game about chances, one that respects its speed as much as revels in it. And if Sonic Team is truly willing to make a game about the freedom of speed, then I think that Sonic can do more than just survive. I think he can stand up with the best of them once again. I'm going to put a list of all the games I mentioned down in Hyrule. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Let's just pretend this is Sonic Heroes, alright?